Hi there and welcome to Bike File with me, Wazza. You join us today in a beautifully balmy Donington Park where I'm going to be having some playtime with Aprilia's Mille R. Now despite being just 4 years old, this bike is a thoroughbred V-twin of the highest order. So let's see what it's all made up of. Fully adjustable Öhlins forks and rear shock for sublime handling. Check. Fully adjustable Öhlins steering damper to calm any nasty tank slap moments. Yep, it's there. Lightweight Oz racing wheels for less unsprung weight and quicker steering. Oh lordy, yes. Pad per piston Brembo front calipers for double leading edge contact, better bite and more braking power. Oh yes, they are there. Italian panache, charisma and character? By the truckload. Disgusting exhaust can the size of the average family dustbin? Yep, unfortunately it seems you can't quite have everything. And all of this for 10 grand. Fair enough, it ain't exactly peanuts by any stretch of the imagination, but there's no doubting you do get an awful lot of bang for your buck with a Mille R. You can always save yourself a couple of grand and go for the standard Mille. But if performance and track handling's what you're really after, then trust me, mortgage your granny, sell your kids, get the extra couple of grand and buy yourself the R. You won't regret it. I actually spent last year racing a Mille. This is my race bike here. Now, although it looks pretty different to the stock bike, if you were to take off the race bodywork, have a look underneath, there's not a great deal of difference at all. Only main changes with this are we put a race exhaust system on it, stripped all the road gear off, got a selection of sprockets so we could gear it for the right circuits, kept it in sticky rubber, and that was it. Point to all this is, you buy one of these, you really have almost got yourself a race bike straight out of the crate. You see, handling is this bike's ace card, and with fully adjustable Öhlins units at both ends, setup potential for different tracks is very good indeed. But as well as that, the stock settings the bike comes on are a good compromise. And as with all suspension adjustments, don't bother going tinkering just for the sake of it. Only do it when personally you feel that things could be better for your riding style. She's a chunky looking bike, the Mille, and if you sling a leg over her, she's going to feel a little bit cumbersome to start with thanks to the tall seat, chunky tank, all that kind of stuff. But get her rolling and it all drops away and you're left with probably one of the most responsive out of the crate sports bikes on the market today. But enough from me and the Mille, because now it's time to go over and see Louise, who's out with the Sachs 800 Roadster.
Now, if you've always fancied yourself as a bit of an easy rider, but you've realised that those price tags hanging from the handlebars of custom bikes are not so easy on the eye, then there could well have been one manufacturer you may have overlooked. Sachs. It's not a name you'll probably be familiar with, but they're a small German company specialising in hand-built bikes. This is their 800cc Roadster, and it's quite a looker. With its high-gloss, hard plastic fuel tank, gold fork stanchions, twin discs up front, a single headlamp and chrome clocks, the Roadster is quietly assertive. You really experience this as soon as you park up. Whilst road testing this bike, we were bombarded with questions about what it was, who made it and how much for, from both bikers and non-bikers alike. The Roadster's engine is donated straight from the Suzuki Intruder. Now it's a VX800 donor lump, which is an air-cooled V-twin, and it only puts out 57 brake horsepower. The characteristic of the motor wouldn't be anything without the smooth 5-ratio gearbox which connects to the shaft final drive, avoiding the oily chain maintenance so many of us might neglect. Being essentially a German-Japanese muscle bike, you might expect a little chrome and you certainly won't be disappointed. There's enough here to keep the most enthusiastic buffer busy all day in the garage. The exhaust system, a set of polished slash pipes, sound throaty without being too loud, but an aftermarket set would do wonders. By the way, the pipes also get very hot after a short while. You have been warned.
Ah, this is more like it. Cruising along these Lancashire lanes. Not exactly the Pacific Coast Highway in California, but nevertheless, we're in jolly old England, and this is the kind of bike to do it on. It feels great to ride. It's really smooth. I mean, let's face it, it's got a damn good coupling of a Japanese engine, so I mean, it handles really well. Woo!
If you're thinking this bike is simply a German copy of a Buell, then you might have missed the point. This bike wasn't created to be a new hooligan tool. It's an original bike created with style, using a reliable power plant, which will only help mature Sachs' infant reputation in the bike world. It's a great hand-built machine, demonstrating good value at $5,599 on the road.
Of course, the suspension settings are really soft as standard, but if you did want to pull out those corners with a little more vigour, just firm up that rear shock and you'll notice quite a difference.
So let's take a look at the scores on the doors. Oh, let's talk comfort. It's like sitting at home on your sofa. It's absolutely ideal, this seat, if you're going on a longer journey, and of course a short one, absolutely no problem. When I first jumped on the bike, I thought, crikey, what a long stretch to the handlebars, and that does take a bit of getting used to. But overall, I reckon 8 out of 10. Now as for performance, I think we'll give it 7 out of 10. There's no way that this engine is underpowered for this kind of chassis. And of course, a bike like this will help you keep your licence nice and clean. There's plenty of grunt all the way through the rev range, and it loves powering out those corners. Build quality, well, I reckon the Roadster deserves 8 out of 10. You see, this bike is Sachs' most accomplished product yet, and I reckon it's a great indication of things to come. I hate to say it, but those Krauts really know how to hammer a bike together. Now let's give it 8 out of 10 once again for value for money, because you see, this bike, well, it's a head turner. You really don't see that many of them. And I suppose for Sachs to sell a bit more, it would have to be more realistically priced like the Ducati Monster, but still, it's a lot of bike with a lot of muscle. Now as for street cred, well, I think by the looks of that bike, it deserves a 9 out of 10. But the problem is, I'm riding it around the streets of Lancashire. And here in Blackburn, if you don't ride an R1, a 996 or a GSXR, then you're nothing but a shandy drinking scooter rider.
The Sachs 800 Roadster, terrific alternative. Nicely styled, plenty of chrome on there, the type of bike you'd want to pick on a nice hot sunny day, but it's got that lovely throbbing Suzuki engine in it. Again, shaft drive makes it more practical. Good alternative.
I like the Roadster 800. It's a good looking bike, it's easy to ride, nice to ride around town, good riding position. It's not something I'd use on a long distance or for touring. For that, I need something more powerful.
Well, the 800 Roadster is my kind of bike, cross between a cruiser and a retro. 60 brake horsepower, the shaft drive at the back, and 4-stroke V-twin engine. It's nice, looks nice, handles nice, not really good for touring, good for country lanes, around the town use. Bit pricey, but good looking bike.
Welcome back to the Mill AR. Now let's have a look at the motor. She's only making 115 horsepower at the back wheel, so she's no manic GSXR Thal-style fire breather, but remember, this is a V-twin, so the way the power comes in is much more usable, and you will find this bike deceptively fast. And that's it for part 1, but join us again in part 2 when we'll be back with some more Bike File. Welcome back to part 2 of Bike File, and as you can see, I have not moved an inch during the commercial break. Now it's time to get back to the Mill AR and check out the motor. The power surge is strong and healthy and a little more raw than Italy's other twin, the Ducati 998. But it's still a case of using fewer gear changes on the Mill 8 than you would on a Big 4 and letting that mid-range pull you along for the fast lap times, rather than screaming it up near the red line all the time. And thanks to being such a good handling bike, the Mill 8 can make the most of all the power it has to offer. What this means is that 9 times out of 10 on a track day, you'll go faster on one of these for less effort than on pretty much anything else out there. It's a damned fine package, and make no mistake about it. And with all this talk of the Mill 8's track prowess, it's easy to forget that she can cut it on the road as well. So let's get out and find out about it. The big thumping V-twin power means fast, easy and unflustered progress is yours for the asking, as are wheelies over every crest and hump in the road if that's your thing. The Mill 8's riding position is committed, but it's far less torture-racked than the most obvious competition this bike has in the Ducati 998. There's also a pillion seat conversion kit that comes as standard should you want to impress giggling, impressionable young things, which is something this bike really is quite good at. However, single-seated is the way a Mill AR should be. And if you do buy one, please take it out to the track and stretch its legs. It will reward you for it. But enough of this for the time being, because now it's over to Rod.
High-performance road bikes must have a 4-cylinder engine, an alloy beam frame and lots of flashy, brightly coloured graphics, right? Wrong. This is the Ducati ST4S, the bike that just rewrote the rulebook. The ST4S is the latest addition to Ducati's sports tourer range, though if your idea of a sports tourer is more Goldwing than track bike, you could be in for a shock with this one. Ducati's approach to tourers is to take their stunning 996 sports bike, raise the handlebars and screen a couple of inches, widen the seat and stick a set of panniers in the accessory catalogue. This bike is definitely at the sports end of the spectrum, but concessions to rider comfort and practicality have resulted in a usable, thrilling and taut bike that actually makes a lot of sense on the road. The riding position gives a semi-racing crouch with quite a high seat that invites you to wrap yourself around this elegantly sculpted petrol tank. The handlebars are quite low down and set quite wide, and the footrests are quite well back, so you do get really tucked into this bike. The mirrors work really well too, being mounted low and wide enough to give a really good view of the world receding rapidly backwards. There's plenty of ground clearance, while the narrowish screen keeps most of the wind blast off the rider, just your head and shoulders left to the mercy of the elements. But the real heart and soul of this bike is that magnificent engine. Last year's ST4 used a legendary 916 motor, but based on the philosophy that more is, well, more, Ducati have gone the whole hog and bolted the 996 engine into the ST4S. And what a lump it is. The 996cc water-cooled V-twin, or L-twin, as Ducati insist in their sales brochures, uses fuel injection, 4-valve heads, 11:1 compression ratios and the legendary desmodromic valve operation to pump out a meaty 117 brake horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque. And this is in a bike weighing in at only 204 kilograms. Power comes in strongly from 3000 RPM and continues to surge as the revs climb, propelling the bike forwards in an adrenaline rush of power that broadens your grin from ear to ear. The price you pay for this is a slight lumpiness at low speed, and the motor does sound clattery at tickover with some noise from the clutch. But low speed isn't what this bike is about. Get it out of town and onto the open road, and you can forgive it everything as it demolishes mile after mile with supreme confidence. That confidence is rooted in the bike's handling. Ducati's gorgeous trellis frame is a direct response to what the Italians see as the crude approach favoured by the Japanese with their alloy beam frames. The engine on this bike is mounted as a stressed member, and the whole plot gives big solid mountings for the twin-sided aluminium swinging arm at the rear and the 43mm upside-down forks at the front. Ducati aren't shy of sourcing the best components. The forks are titanium nitrided Showas, and the rear suspension comes from Öhlins with preload and damping adjustable from the rider's seat. The brakes too are arguably the best on the market. The twin Brembo Goldline calipers and floating discs, capable of hauling the bike down from warp speed with a G-force sufficient to wrap you hard against a reassuringly sculpted fuel tank. Styling-wise, the bike is elegant but rather understated, the rather muted metallic grey finish in our test bike looking a little bland. Purchasers requiring something a little flashier may be tempted by the alternative bright red or yellow options. If you're looking for a thoroughbred high-performance all-rounder with real touring ability, take a good look at the Ducati ST4S. Loads of power, loads of torque, and that wonderful Ducati roar. Open the throttle and pretend you're Cal Fogarty. Only marred by low-speed lumpiness which can catch you out in the wrong gear around town. Quick steering, taut handling and the best brakes in the business. For performance, 9 out of 10. The seat's a bit hard and some may find these low handlebars induce risk-takes in traffic, but hey, you weren't expecting the comfort of a Harley-Davidson electric glide with a bike like this, were you? This is a sports bike with touring capabilities and it feels like one. I'm going to give it 6 out of 10 for comfort. Italian quality control hasn't always been the best in years gone by, but things are much improved these days. This bike is well put together and the quality of finish is good. The mirror stems feel a little delicate and I wouldn't expose the engine to too much winter salt, but keeping the bike clean is part of the bonding process that many owners will relish. Build quality, 7 out of 10. Listed at £8,650, you can currently pick an ST4 like this up for £8,500, and that puts it square against the Blackbird, the Triumph Sprint ST and the Hayabusa. You get a lot of bike for your money with the Ducati, and it's got a racetrack heritage, and you also get some of the best cycle parts in the world. This bike is less likely to depreciate quite as much as a Japanese bike would. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for value. This bike's a thoroughbred, a real rider's machine for the man or woman who takes their biking seriously and who wears wraparound shades while doing it. For street cred, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10.
Ducati ST4S. I think it's probably one of the more bikes that you have to have a passion for. It is a superb bike, rated very, very highly throughout all the magazines. Fantastic handling, superb performance, fantastic bike.
The Ducati ST4S, basically it's the Ducati monster but with the 916 engine. Needed to happen years ago. I think the Cagiva Raptor again perhaps does it better with that TL1000 engine in. Pretty bike, capable, you see it you know, week in, week out on the ST4 Challenge. Yeah, like it.
And now, back with the Mille, it's time to sum it all up. First of all, what are we going to give her for performance? I would say this bike is going to get a resounding 10. Why? It's got a great motor, it's got a great chassis, it's got such good running gear. It really is a fabulous package out of the crate, well deserving of full marks. Comfort-wise, the Mille scores a 6. Plus points are the roomy riding position, the copious fairing and the squashy seat. Downsides are that it'll give you wrist ache in town, and the clutch and throttle, although they are better than the early bikes, are still rather heavy. And what about build quality? Well, I think we'll give her an 8 here. First up, you'll be pleased to know that she does crash surprisingly well, as I learnt racing last year. On top of that, really, things are very good. Only let down by the occasional electrical gremlin that seems to affect some bikes. So 8 it is. Value for money. She's no budget bike at 10 grand, but the level of kit on the Millet and the performance it offers is really that of a far more expensive machine, so we gotta go give it a 9. And what about the street cred? Well, the Millet's going to score an 8 here. It's still a limited production bike, so you're guaranteed a dose of exclusivity with it. The brooding lines are very distinctive, but perhaps not everyone's cup of tea, which will lose it a couple of points. But what it loses there, it pulls back by looking exactly like the World Superbike.
The Aprillia RSV. Well, I think it's probably one of the best handling bikes on the road. All-in shockers all round, fantastic handling bike. Definitely a lot better than the standard RSV. Superb bike.
At present, I own an RSV Aprilia Millet, and I would love a Millet R. The bike itself is one of the best V-twins at the moment, and anyone who rides a Ducati, come and see me. I'll show you the bags of torque that mine's got.
Top sports bike, definitely top sports bike. Very, very capable. Sounds the business. Personally, not that struck with the styling. I think there's plenty of other manufacturers that do it much, much better. Again, matte colour's not really my thing, but you can't deny the credentials of the bike. Very, very capable.
Well, I'm afraid that's it for this week's episode of Bike File, but do join us next week when we'll have another splendid selection of dazzling metal for you to enjoy.